Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Today we're going to take on the Shimano Sedona. It's a 4000 series FD reel. Just running a little rough. The customer brought it in. He's asking for a cleanup. It may or may not have gone in the water. We're not quite sure. But there is some remnants as I just look quickly on the top of the rotor as we get to the top of the stroke of the spool. I do notice that there's some dirt in there. There's a lot of accumulated dirt around the side. It may or may not have been salt water, but the customer says it's just not turning as smoothly as it once did. So we'll take this thing apart, we'll give it a good cleaning, and show you the lubrication behind it. And if there's no broken parts, we'll get this one right back into service. So we start by taking off the spool. And already I'm noticing there's quite a collection of dirt and grime in there. So I'm just going to hit this quickly with some WD-40, which is a penetrating oil. And just take a little paper towel to clean up some of that. Yeah, so this definitely has been exposed to some water. That's basically the only way this stuff is getting inside the reel. And it looks in this case like maybe it got dunked. So we'll make sure we clean it up there and try and do what we can to restore this reel. Okay, so there's a little bit of grime in there, so I'm going to go to a steel wool just to clean a little bit more of that off, as it is a tight. Yeah, that's better. Okay, so one of the things that comes to mind right away in doing this is, you know, if you do find yourself in a situation where you lose the reel for whatever reason, it goes overboard, you drop it maybe with a fish on it, whatever, in the sand or in the water, either way, take the time to get it home, get it cleaned. And by cleaning, give it a good bath in fresh water. If you're watching this video, you're probably used to working on mechanical things. If you do, take the side plate off, take the spool off like I've done here, and just remove any foreign matter that might be in there. So I'm going to work on the spool first, since I saw the dirt on the other side. I've removed the retaining clip which holds the drags. I'm going to put that in my parts basket, and I'm going to go in and take the drags out, because I notice again there's quite an accumulation of something here. So let's just get this right from the beginning, and we can move on. So I'm keeping the stack in order. Again, I want to make sure it's clean, and there is some dirt and grime in there, so let's go ahead and do that. Now the Shimano Sedona, and I keep wanting to say Kia Sedona like the car, but the Shimano Sedona has felt washers. Felt washers should be oiled. So I use a Real X oil. It's an oil that's specifically made for fishing reels. And then we place the stack. So a felt washer goes in first, a round metal washer goes in second, and we do some more oiling on that felt washer, making sure all of these are clean. The eared washer, the one with the two tabs, always goes in the middle of the stack. I'm saying always. There are some cases where you will find a reel that has two eared washers, and they go up and down first and last, and then the middle of the stack happens to be the round one. But that's not the case with this particular reel. I've wiped off the contamination and dust on the last one. I've oiled that last felt washer there, and now I'm going to reinstall this. So this doesn't have a purpose other than to hold the drag washers in place. So be careful, it is a spring, it will shoot, and finding it is not always easy. So make sure that you've got it set in the ridge that's the insert for the spool. And once you've done that, you can set that spool aside. Now this fella has braid line on this, so I'm going to assume this reel is braid ready. And again, we can see that stuff I was talking about earlier. So I'm pretty sure this reel has gone into the water. I'm going to remove the rotor and clean it. So to do that, you want to take off this little retention washer that's holding on the spool shaft. In this case, it's looks like there may be two on there. They're plastic washers. We can take those off, prying them up. They usually come off better one at a time. It's sort of a friction hold. So that's the first one. We'll take that off. You'll notice I'm wearing a latex glove on my non-working hand, and I like to do that to keep the contaminants off my hand as best as possible. I don't have a lot of luck working with these latex gloves on my working hand, and as a result I don't put them on, but I try to keep that hand clean as much as I can. Okay, we got the last one off there. Sometimes this is your little trip gear to let you know that your drag is working. There's a little metal clip behind here that runs into the ridges on this, just to let you know that you are back spooling. In this case, we're going to go take that rotor off now because it does have some junk on it. That's held in by a retaining clip. And again, I'm putting all my small parts into the parts basket, and then it's held in by a lock washer. So I'm having a little trouble grabbing that little lock washer there. It always helps to have a good assembly of reels and wrenches, just so you can grab one piece or the other. There we go, we finally got that off. We got it loosened, and we can take the rest off by hand. That's a 12mm nut, I guess. Alright, and again, that's going to go in the parts basket. So I'm doing a video here. I know the sequence that these reels come in and off, but if you don't, by all means take a picture along the way. Use your digital camera, use your cell phone, whatever. But as you remove parts, kind of note the sequence that they're coming out in and take pictures of the parts that you've taken out along the way. That way you'll know where it is that the parts came from. If you look in your parts basket and find out that your memory did not serve you well and you have an extra piece in there. Also, it's easy to invert pieces, put them on backwards or upside down or what have you. So if that's the case, you want to make sure that you know, you can check yourself by looking at the picture to see, okay, it was a left-right or a right-left or what have you. Okay, that's good. This is a anti-reverse bearing, and there's another bearing underneath that. That's the spool bearing. This looks clean, so I'm just going to go ahead and put some Real X oil on the bearings. I oil bearings. If this looked like it needed a cleaning, I'd pull these screws out. That would remove the anti-reverse as well as the spool bearing. But this one seems to be more grit and grime than it does anything else. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to set this aside. We'll go work on the case. So we're going to take the handle off first to get to the internal gears. This is a screw, which means it's a through handle. And I like to put that button right back onto the handle itself so that I don't lose it. And again, into my parts basket there. In this case, that little collar piece has come up. I like to put that into the parts basket as well so we don't have any problem there. There's a bump guard on this particular one. It's held on by 2 screws. If you weren't familiar with this reel, you might miss the other one, which is sitting on the top of the handle here, which reminds me to tell you, do not pry these off. If you're having trouble, if you pulled that one, didn't know that other one was here and kind of were having an issue with that, don't go ahead and pry it, because you'll break a tab like this, and then you're going to have to go get yourself another bump guard. Three screws hold the housing together after that. And this is interesting because the side that's going to come out is not the screw side. The side that this is releasing is in the palm of my hand at the moment, and you just want to make sure you know that as you go about taking these out, because you don't want to have parts spill out by making a trying to tug this or something. So this is the side that comes off once you release that. Just kind of have to work it out here. There you go. All right. So there's your answer as to why this is sluggish. This is a very dry reel. It hasn't been maintained. Again, I don't know if it went in the water. There is some corrosion here on the metal gear itself. That would indicate that there's been some intrusion of water, and it needs to be cleaned up to make this operational and serviceable. All right, so I'm going to start by taking the spool shaft out. That'll give me clearance to pull the main gear. And again, the customer is saying that he thought it was dirt and accumulation. It obviously was. There's also a problem here, as we can see, with lack of lubrication. We'll get that all cleaned up and fixed and put back into play. So I'm going to pull the spool shaft out first. Then we can take the main gear off, and we can pull the crossline block and crossline assembly out. And this is a fairly quick maintenance once you do that. It's pretty clean because it's just had all the lubrication evaporate. So again, I'll hit that with the penetrating oil. Grab a Q-tip or a cotton swab to get the dried grease off the case. And this looks like a plastic or a graphite case. The pinion gear, I'm checking to make sure there's no bends or breaks in that gear itself. Seems to be operating properly. A little bit of dirt, so I'm just going to grab this in the channels, pull back some of that dried grease. I use a little pin. You can use a toothpick, you can use the blade of a small screwdriver, but you do want to clean that out if you noticed that your reel is sluggish, that it hasn't been maintained, that you have a lot of dried grease in here. Those kinds of things, they just happen, right? And a lot of times the reels that come into my place, it isn't even the original owner, right? Somebody bought it because the reel got sluggish and the fella just decided to sell it and get a different one. And so you don't know what kind of problems you're even inheriting. So, all right, I'm going to use a blue grease. I use a Penn precision reel grease. There's other manufacturers' grease out there that work equally fine. I'm going to put that on the bottom of the crosswind gear and on the face. This is what is driven by the back of the main gear, which makes the spool go up and down. All right, so we're going to reset that in place. We're going to take that blue grease and we're going to put it on that pinion gear. And obviously it hasn't had grease in some time, so we want to spin it to make sure that there's an even distribution of it. And then we'll go look at the back of this. Now the corrosion on this is corrosion, but I can't tell from this application whether it's salt or not. So again, it's clean otherwise. We're going to put it on the back side of this, and in that groove, which is where the stud from that crosswind gear rides. All right, so we've got that set up. And these bearings seem to be on pretty tight here, and at the risk of kind of having trouble with them, I'm just going to go ahead and oil these. They're sealed bearings, and give them a good drink of oil. We'll do the best I can. Again, when you see something like this, it's a little bit tough to try and pull things other than what it should. You can see the accumulation of the dried grease on the main gear again. We'll go ahead and clean that up. Use that cotton swab to get the remainder. Two final checks here. We want to make sure that the teeth are okay on this reel. I'm checking to make sure that they're uniform, that there's no breaks in them, which seems to be the case here. We seem to be okay. And I'm looking to make sure that they're all even, that there's no unusual wear this way as well. So we've checked the pinion gear. We're going to check the back gear here, which drives the crosswind block. That one's okay. We've checked the other, so it's if there's any rough riding, and I think we've seen the cause of that, it's going to be in the problem area, being that it didn't have the lubrication and it probably got dropped in the water. So we're good with that. We'll put a little bit more on the drive on the back side here. And for those of you that are new to this, the reason why we pulled the shaft first was that the shaft rides between these two, and you would not be able to pull the main gear out if you did not remove the shaft. So just a point of interest there. Alrighty, I'm going to go reinstall the bearing in the main gear in this. this. We're gonna do it. This is inhibiting it, so we're going to pull that crosswind gear out. The crosswind gear is sits behind, or sits in front of that side plate bearing. That's what I was just doing there in terms of the adjustment. Now I'm going to reset that stud to the bottom so that I can reinstall the crosswind block. Making sure it gets seated into that that catch there. I'll go ahead and clean off the spool shaft. Put a light coat of blue grease on that as well. And then we can reinstall this. So we're kind of reversing our process now. And then we look in our basket here, find the little screw that went with that. Now I'm noticing from the factory that this screw came with a little bit of Loctite. And I guess that's okay if you're coming out of the factory with it. I generally do not recommend Loctite on fishing reels because most of the time that results in a case where you cannot get the reel to perform afterwards. If you have to take a side case out and you've Loctited it, you can't remove the side case and so on. Alright, now back to that side case. Speaking of that, we've oiled all the internal components. We're going to go ahead and put that side case on. We have the side case screws, which were 4 of those. I noted on the way to doing this that there's 3 screws on the side plate and the 1 deep one, which goes into the carrier or the bump guard. So we're going to go ahead and put the 3 main screws in. And then I took the rotor off here. I'm going to install that bump guard before I go back and put the rotor back on. It's just easier access to those 2 screws. The bump guard goes first, and that has a small screw on it. And again, if you took pictures along the way, if you weren't quite sure how this came out or how that reinstalled or how to deal with that particular item, you can go back to your pictures as a reference. But the Sedona is a nice reel. I believe the current edition of this model retails for about $60 US, so a little bit less in euros. It's a reliable reel. It's gotten good reviews. It's stood the test of time, and it's a general purpose reel as a size 40. It can be used in rivers, bays, light inshore ocean applications. Can be a casting reel. It can be set up for drop fishing from piers and so on. So I'm going to grab this handle right now. We're going to just set that in, and I'm going to make sure I have smooth operation before I go any further. And I do, and it seems to be operating a whole lot better than before we did the lubrication. Okay, putting that handle on, then we'll go back and install the rotor. We've already serviced the drags, so this reel will be pretty much completed and cleaned up and ready for the customer to go use it again or use it for the first time, depending on how he came about this reel. All right, that goes on. Next up was the holding lockdown nut there, and I noticed on this one that it came off the traditional counterclockwise. Some of these reels on the spool rotor come off clockwise. You just have to make sure that it's left or right-handed thread. I like to tell folks that if you're working with the wrenching and it's not coming, don't force it, but try to go the other route and make sure that it isn't a reverse thread one. I also like to tell folks, go get the schematics for these. In the Shimano's case, they should be available right on the Shimano website. I believe they're also available on other sites like Mike's Reels up in Canada. But on the internet, it doesn't matter where you are. But if you type in Mike's Reels, you should be able to find the Shimano schematics as well. And why that makes that good is you can play along and make sure that by looking at that burst diagram that you have all the pieces and parts. And also, if there is a need for a replacement part, you can generally order it right from that site there. So there's other sites out there as well. I believe E-Replacement Parts also handles them. And I believe you can also contact Shimano directly, and they'll work with you on that as well. Okay, so we're putting the last of this on. We're putting the drag knob back on. We've completed the cleaning. We've taken a look at it. It's a nice solid reel. It's got some internal corrosion, but nothing that's going to affect operation. We've got it cleaned up, and it's pretty much taken on a whole new life here. So all things are good. All right, so that's the Shimano Sedona 4000 FD. If you have one of them, you now know how to take it apart and clean it. If you're considering buying one, understand that it's a nice, moderately priced reel in the Shimano line. And if you are fishing one, then I wish you good luck fishing. And with that, I'm going to say thank you for viewing the video. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. If you liked the video, please indicate that. If you want to see more of these, please subscribe as I post frequently. Thank you again for watching.